Good evening. Good evening and welcome everybody. My name is Irena Grudzińska-Gross and I welcome you on behalf of the Institute for Human Sciences at Boston University. We are, as many of you who come to our events know, we are very much interested, among other things, in presenting European issues and European thinkers. And Slavoj Zizek is definitely a European thinker, but also a global thinker or international thinker or kind of a flying public intellectual. So we are very, very happy and very lucky to have him this evening with us. I am not going to introduce him. Professor Jeffrey Merman is going to introduce him. Professor Jeffrey Merman, as also many of you know, is university professor and professor of French at Boston University. His list of publications is very long. Among his many interests, he is also interested in philosophy and in Lacan, and many of his interests are shared with Slavoj Zizek. We are going to have this introduction, then Slavoj Zizek is going to talk. After that, we will have a discussion, and I will ask everybody to queue. Here we have a microphone, and to ask questions. And after the discussion, so that the conversation is not interrupted and it continues, we are going to have a very warm and wonderful reception outside the doors here, to which everybody is very cordially invited. So let's start. And Professor Merman.
Well, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome our speaker, Slavoj Zizek, back to Boston this evening. Where to begin? Well, when in the year 1975, the editors of a volume entitled in French, The Technical Writings of Freud, by the arcane French psychoanalyst Lacan, when they chose as their cover illustration a photo of a giant elephant poised to rampage through the savannah, the message to many of us was clear. When it comes to the unconscious, be prepared for absolutely anything. Or perhaps that implausibility or preposterousness themselves are the touchstones of the unconscious. Now, be that as it may, I am not sure that any of us were prepared for anything so implausible, so engagingly traumatic as the revelation some 15 years later that the future of Lacanian thought would lie with a Slovenian enough to have run for the presidency of the Republic of Slovenia and prepared to argue convincingly that the royal road to the Lacanian interpretation of the unconscious was via American popular culture. Just savor the title of his 1993 volume, Everything You Wanted to Know, You Always Wanted to Know About Lacan, but were afraid to ask Hitchcock, and you'll have a sense of the irresistibility of the Zizek effect. Slavoj Zizek is the world's premier virtuoso of Lacanian dogmatics. Lest that term dogmatics throw you, I would suggest that you think of it as an invitation to bracket the truth claims of his premises in all of their systematicity until you are in a position to judge the rollicking richness of the results they can deliver. With Zizek, psychoanalysis, so often decried for failing to meet the test of falsifiability, psychoanalysis frequently ends up yielding results which, in their paradoxical charge, might be described as better than true. He is the thinker who has dealt most ingeniously with the joker in the Lacanian pack, the category of the real. He's also the thinker who has delivered us a superego drenched in its obscenely libidinal sources, as it originally was in Freud's The Rat Man. That is, the superego not as venerable patriarch, if you will, but as dirty old man, replete with the stained underwear of Hermann Kafka, that's France's dad. He has also made use of Lacan, as he has somewhere written, as a privileged intellectual tool to reactualize German idealism. So Lacan, whose inspiration was in part the legendary seminar on Hegel of Kojève in the 1930s, seems headed via Zizek through a series of altogether unexpected turns back to Hegel and company. Well, I could go on listing the tens of provocatively titled volumes he has written. The next is to be, I believe, called In Defense of Lost Causes. I could go on mentioning his current position as director of the Birkbeck Institute for the Humanities at Birkbeck College, University of London. I could go on letting you know of the recently founded online International Journal of Zizek Studies, or of the documentary film Zizek, that's right, with an exclamation mark. I leave you instead with one piquant detail. My sources tell me that there is currently a chic nightclub in a Tony section of Buenos Aires named, you guessed it, Zizek. Please welcome our speaker, whose subject this evening is Fear Thy Neighbor as Thyself, the antinomies of tolerant reason. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for Irena to inviting me, for Jeffrey for this wonderful introduction. I especially agree, without any irony, with that very precise point about dogmatics. I think that, and especially I would even go a step further and say dogmatics in the theological sense in the word. Why? Maybe it will become clear from what I will be saying. So let me go to the point. But nonetheless, I hope you will not be too disappointed, because it will not be only jokes in what I will be saying. Okay, let me begin in a very traditional way with a big question. What can philosophy do today? What can it tell the general public haunted by the problems of ecology, racism, religious conflicts, and so on? I think that the task of philosophy is not to provide answers, but to show how the way we perceive a problem can be itself part of a problem, mystifying it instead of enabling us to solve it. There are not only wrong answers, there are also wrong questions. These wrong questions are what we call ideology. When we are dealing with a problem, which is undoubtedly a real problem, the ideological designation or perception introduces its inevitable mystification. So again, when people ask me ecology or war, what can we do? Well, I don't know. What I can do as a philosopher is just to analyze how we perceive the problem. Let me take the example of tolerance. I'm opposed to this notion. I think it's a pseudo-notion. Now, of course, the immediate reaction of well-meaning liberals is, but how can you be for intolerance towards foreigners? How can you be for anti-feminism, for homophobia, and so on and so on? But this is the catch. Of course, I'm not for intolerance towards foreigners, for anti-feminism, and so on. What I am against is the perception, which is today more or less automatic, of racism as a problem of tolerance. Make a simple experiment. I did make it. Go and check on the web Martin Luther King's speeches. If there is a great figure of anti-racist fight, of course it's Martin Luther King. You will see that the word intolerance is practically absent there. For Martin Luther King, one doesn't fight racism with tolerance, but with what? Emancipatory political struggle, even armed struggle. So, why are so many problems today perceived as problems of intolerance rather than problems of inequality, exploitation, injustice, and so on? You see my point? That's for me the problem. Racism is a problem, but to perceive racism as problem of tolerance, it's not automatic. In this innocent shift of perspective, there is ideology. Why? I claim the reason is the liberal multiculturalist basic ideological operation, the, let's call it, culturalization of politics. political differences, differences conditioned by political inequality or economic exploitation, are naturalized, neutralized into cultural differences. That is, into different ways of life, which are something given, something that cannot be overcome, so they can only be tolerated. The cause of this culturalization is the retreat, the failure of direct political solutions such as welfare state or various socialist projects. Tolerance is their post-political ersatz. And I think the same goes for harassment.